time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The king did not hesitate when the final page was placed before him. Inside a sealed palace chamber, Charles lifted his pen and signed an emergency decree stripping Prince Harry of every remaining royal privilege attached to his former position. No ceremonial warning. No final public appeal. Only one signature, one stunned silence, and a decision that transformed a family fracture into an official act of the crown. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles kept his hand near the document after the ink settled, as though moving it would make the decision real. The emergency royal decree was a formal order to change how the royal household treated one of its own. It removed Harry's ceremonial access, official palace privileges, protected royal accommodation, institutional representation rights, and the special courtesies once granted because he had been born into the monarchy. Those losses completely ended the gray area that had allowed him to live outside royal duty while still carrying parts of royal authority. The king understood what he had not erased. Harry remained his son. His bloodline had not vanished, and his place within the family's history could not be struck away by a signature. Yet the decree separated that personal bond from the privileges attached to a working royal, meaning someone who performs official duties for the crown. Charles had chosen to protect the institution, even if the choice wounded the father beneath the monarch. Silence deepened when the advisors left. Charles stared at Harry's name, then turned the signed page face down. No speech followed. No relief appeared. The grief in his expression made the victory feel like defeat, because the crown had gained certainty while a father had lost another piece of his son. Harry received the decision in private and said nothing at first. He read the wording once, then again, his anger rising beside humiliation. The palace had not invited another negotiation. It had acted. He understood that future access would depend on permission, not birth, and that every closed door would carry his father's signature. Only 4 people had known the decree's language before it was signed. One senior courtier paused over the harshest clause and asked whether Charles truly wished to make the separation permanent. The king did not answer. He had approved emergency provisions only after concluding that another incident could break trust and weaken the monarchy. The signature shocked the palace, but its true weight could only be understood by looking at the father, the son, and the brother, now standing on opposite sides of the crown. This was never simply a king punishing a prince. It was a father admitting that love had failed to prevent destruction. Charles had spent years balancing duty against guilt, while Harry carried the belief that the institution had repeatedly chosen survival over him. Between them stood William, silent but watchful, knowing that every concession to his brother could become another burden placed upon the future of the crown. Charles felt the weight of 2 roles pulling him in opposite directions. As monarch, he was expected to protect the institution from confusion, pressure, and repeated public damage. As a father, he still remembered the frightened boy who had once reached for him in moments of grief. The crown, meaning the system of duty and authority carried by the sovereign, demanded firmness. His heart demanded one more chance. That conflict made the decree painful, because protecting the monarchy now meant hurting his own child. Harry faced losses that went far beyond rooms, ceremonies, or formal greetings. Royal access had given him a sense of belonging even after he stepped away from official duties. Ceremonial recognition meant being publicly acknowledged as part of the working family during major national occasions. Without it, he would no longer stand inside the structure on his own terms. The decision threatened his status, his family's symbolic place, and his final belief that he could return whenever the conditions suited him. William paused outside his father's study before entering. He knew the conversation waiting inside was not only about his brother's privileges. Charles was judging himself, questioning whether patience had become weakness, and whether every failed attempt at peace proved that he had failed as a parent. The prince chose his words carefully, because one sentence spoken too sharply could deepen the wound between all 3 men. Harry held an old family photograph after receiving the decree. For a brief moment, anger gave way to sadness as he looked at himself standing beside William in a happier time. They had once shared grief, duty, and the strange pressure of royal life. Now the same institution that had bound them together had become the wall dividing them. William had already warned Charles in a private recorded conversation that undefined privileges created a dangerous gray area. Harry could remain outside royal responsibility while repeatedly using his birth to pressure the palace for access, protection, and recognition. The king resisted the harshest wording for hours. He crossed out one sentence, restored it, then removed it again. Everything changed when a confidential briefing arrived. Charles read the final page in silence, returned the severe clause, and closed the folder. It referred to a private invitation, a demand made behind closed doors, and words from Harry that the monarch could no longer overlook. Their pain had been building for years, but one private incident finally turned an injured family relationship into a royal emergency. The decree began weeks earlier, with a demand Harry believed the palace could not refuse. During a private call arranged without aides, he insisted on returning for a major national ceremony, with full royal treatment, protected accommodation, prominent seating, and formal recognition beside senior family members. Charles listened without interruption, but when Harry warned that rejection would bring consequences, the conversation changed, and the king's patience finally broke. Harry had left royal duty believing distance would give him freedom, but each attempt at reconciliation arrived with fresh conditions. Private grievances became public disputes. Family conversations became material for interviews, documentaries, and recorded accounts. The working monarchy, meaning the small group of royals who officially represent the crown, could no longer tell whether he wished to return as a son, a prince, or a public figure, demanding selected benefits without accepting the duties attached to them. Charles tightened his grip on the telephone when the demands widened. Harry insisted that his wife and children must receive visible recognition equal to their family connection. He wanted protected accommodation, formal seating, and a place beside senior royals at the coming state commemoration, a national ceremony held to honor an important person or event. To the younger son, these were signs of dignity and safety. To the king, they reopened every unresolved question the palace had struggled to contain. Harry paced after making his case, convinced his father was once again dismissing his fears. He believed the palace wanted his family close enough to display loyalty, but distant enough to deny respect. Charles remained seated after the call ended, hurt by the tone more than the request. What might have sounded like a plea had hardened into an ultimatum, and the monarch knew that yielding would reward pressure rather than rebuild trust. Then came the final demand. Harry insisted on a front-row ceremonial position and warned that refusal would lead him to release private correspondence from earlier palace negotiations. The letters contained personal exchanges, proposed compromises, and details never meant for public judgment. The threat struck at more than family privacy. It placed the crown under pressure by suggesting royal access could be won through disclosure. Charles summoned William and 2 constitutional advisors immediately. A constitutional advisor is a specialist who explains how royal decisions fit within law, tradition, and the monarch's powers. The king placed his written notes from the call on the table and stated that the institution could not continue operating beneath repeated private threats. William read the pages twice, then looked toward his father without speaking. Still, Charles refused to sign at once. He demanded one final face-to-face meeting with Harry, with no aides to soften the words, and no public platform to distort them. One last withdrawal could prevent the rupture. One refusal would make it permanent. The palace prepared legal language, but Charles still wanted to look into his son's eyes before making the most painful decision of his reign. The room contained no aides, no cameras, and no place left to hide. Charles sat opposite Harry with the unsigned decree between them, while William remained near the far end of the table. The king asked his younger son to withdraw the threat, accept a private family role, and stop using royal access as leverage. Harry refused. Then a chair moved sharply across the floor. and years of controlled anger erupted. Charles had arranged the meeting as the final chance to stop the crisis without punishment or public shame. He offered a compromise that would allow Harry to attend selected family occasions privately, but without official status, ceremonial precedence, palace representation, or demands tied to public visibility. Ceremonial precedence meant the formal order deciding where members of the royal family stand, sit, and appear during major events. The proposal preserved family contact, but it ended the idea that private connection could still produce public authority. The king leaned forward and told his son that love had never disappeared. He still saw the boy he had protected, the young man he had worried about, and the wounded figure now sitting across from him. But he could no longer defend actions that placed the monarchy under repeated pressure. Every threat, interview, and demand weakened trust. Every exception made for Harry created another question the palace could not answer. Harry rose in anger and accused both his father and William of choosing the institution over his family. He turned toward his brother and said he had never truly been expected to return. The prince remained still, but the words struck hard. He had watched every private offer collapse, and now he was being blamed for the final failure. William opened a folder and produced a written summary of earlier concessions. The document recorded private invitations, protected family meetings, direct contact with Charles, and quiet paths back into personal relationships without royal duties. A documented account is a written record created to preserve what was offered and how each side responded. Harry scanned the pages, pushed them away, and said those offers had never recognized what he had lost. The refusal changed everything. Charles asked for the threatened correspondence one final time, but his son would not surrender it or promise silence. The monarch closed the folder slowly. His voice dropped rather than rose. "Then you have made the decision for me." Harry left before the meeting formally ended. The door closed behind him, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the argument. William stayed beside the table as his father placed one hand on the unsigned decree. Neither man celebrated. Both understood that the next movement of that hand would end the last uncertainty. Harry walked away believing his father might still retreat, but inside that room, control had already shifted to those prepared to protect the crown at any cost. When the door closed behind Harry, William finally said what Charles had feared hearing. The crisis was no longer about repairing a relationship. It was about whether the monarchy could function while one family member claimed royal advantages without accepting royal discipline. Charles looked toward the empty chair his son had left behind. Then he asked the advisors to explain exactly how far the crown could go. William spoke with controlled urgency. He warned that every unresolved exception would become a problem passed into the next reign. Royal privileges were not one single possession that could be removed with a simple sentence. They formed a network of access, ceremonial courtesies, palace support, residences, security arrangements, representation rights, and precedence. Precedence meant the formal order deciding who stands, sits, or appears first at official events. Leaving even one area unclear could allow the same pressure to return under a different name. Charles reacted sharply. He heard accusation beneath his son's warning, and asked whether William believed his hesitation had weakened the monarchy. The prince did not retreat. He said patience had once protected the family, but uncertainty now protected the crisis. The words stung because they carried truth. The king's anger slowly faded, and he looked again at the chair Harry had abandoned. The advisors explained the limits of royal authority. As sovereign, Charles controlled many internal household privileges, including access, accommodation, official support, and ceremonial treatment. The sovereign is the reigning monarch who leads the royal household and performs the crown's constitutional role. Some legal titles and constitutional positions, however, required separate action beyond a personal decree. The king could close palace doors immediately, but he could not rewrite every law through emotion alone. A palace legal advisor then placed two drafts before him. The first was temporary, cautious, and reversible. It suspended selected privileges while leaving a clear path back. The second was comprehensive. It ended Harry's special royal access and removed every internal courtesy still connected to his former working role. A documented legal note attached to the stronger version warned that partial action would only delay another confrontation. Charles studied both pages in silence. William watched his father read the temporary version twice before setting it aside. The king chose the stronger decree, but he refused to make it completely merciless. He added a private clause allowing Harry direct access to him during serious illness, grief, or a genuine family emergency. The crown would close its gates, yet a father would leave one narrow door unlocked. The choice brought no relief. Charles signed away institutional privilege while protecting the smallest possible human bond. William understood what that compromise cost him. Harry would not discover the change through a grand ceremony or public announcement. He would feel it through rejected requests, altered instructions, and doors that no longer opened at his name. The king had preserved one private bond, but everywhere else, the palace began removing the privileges Harry once believed could never disappear. The decree became real when Harry's request for royal accommodation was rejected, with a single formal sentence. The residence he expected to use was no longer available to him. The palace office that once coordinated his visits would no longer act on his behalf. His name remained part of the family, but the machinery that had once moved around him had stopped, and for the first time, he felt the full force of exclusion. Harry read the refusal twice before lowering the phone. Then he placed it down so hard that the glass beside it shook. The message did not insult him or argue with him. That made it worse. It simply confirmed that automatic palace accommodation, household coordination, ceremonial positioning, official introductions, institutional representation, and access to private royal facilities were no longer his by right. Institutional representation meant acting with the formal support and authority of the royal household. That authority had now been removed. Meghan watched his disbelief turn into fury. She asked whether Charles truly intended to enforce every clause, even during a family visit. Harry answered that the order was designed to make him feel like a stranger inside the family that had shaped his entire life. He could still enter as a son or brother if invited, but no longer as a prince, expecting the palace to move around him. The new rules cut deeper, because future visits would be treated as private family arrangements. A private arrangement meant any meeting would be personal, limited, and without official royal backing. No staff office would prepare his program. No automatic introduction would place him beside senior members. No ceremonial position would be reserved. Every request would require approval, and every approval could be refused. Inside the palace, staff received direct written instructions. Outdated access codes were removed. Internal protocols were rewritten. Any future request carrying Harry's name had to be sent to a restricted senior office rather than handled through ordinary family channels. The change moved quickly, but not everyone carried it out without emotion. One palace employee opened a storage list and paused over a box of childhood belongings. Letters, school items, and small personal objects were due to be transferred into long-term storage. Instead, the staff member quietly kept the box in its familiar place. That small act did not weaken the decree, but it revealed the discomfort behind it. The institution could enforce separation. The people inside it still remembered the boy. Harry's anger finally began to crack when another message appeared. This one carried no legal wording, no staff signature, and no reference to privilege. Charles had written it personally. The king was not defending the decree. A father was asking his son to speak alone, without advisors, conditions, or public consequences. The institution had shut him out, yet beneath the weight of the crown, Charles was preparing one final private attempt to reach the son he had punished. For the first time in years, Charles asked Harry to speak without titles, advisors, demands, or conditions. No palace secretary joined the call. No written record was prepared. The king did not defend the decree, and Harry did not begin with an accusation. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. Then Charles said the words Harry had never expected. "I could not save your privileges without losing what I am sworn to protect." Harry listened without interrupting. The practical consequences had already begun. and both men had exhausted every public argument and every private negotiation. A semi-detached royal meant someone who remained connected to the monarchy by birth, while operating outside its duties and discipline. Charles could no longer allow that uncertain position to continue. His son was still family, but he could not claim royal authority without accepting royal responsibility. Harry finally admitted that the rejection felt like proof the family had erased him. He spoke of locked doors, refused accommodation, and the humiliation of needing permission, where his name had once been enough. Charles answered quietly that the decree had removed privileges, not blood or memory. He still remembered the child, the soldier, and the grieving young man behind the anger. The crown had drawn a boundary, but a father had not forgotten his son. Charles then apologized for years of silence. He admitted that distance had allowed hurt to harden, and that too many conversations had been delayed until every word carried suspicion. Yet the monarch refused to apologize for protecting the institution from further pressure. The crown represented national duty, continuity, and public trust. If private threats could control it, then every future decision would become vulnerable. Harry's breathing slowed before he made the first real concession. In the private call, he confirmed that he would not release the correspondence used during their confrontation. The letters, proposals, and recorded negotiations would remain private. That promise ended the immediate threat that had forced the emergency decree forward, but it could not undo what had already been signed. Charles offered one personal condition in return. Harry could contact him directly during illness, grief, or a genuine family emergency. No palace office, no formal request, no ceremonial demand. But the younger son could never again use public pressure, threatened disclosure, or royal events as leverage. The relationship could survive only if it existed without institutional bargaining. Harry agreed after a long silence. He did not sound relieved, and he did not call the decree fair. Still, he accepted that his future would exist outside royal authority. The decision gave Charles no victory, only a painful form of peace. At that exact moment, the palace statement moved toward publication, and their private understanding was about to face a public storm. Father and son had finally spoken honestly, but beyond their private call, Britain awakened to a decision that would define the monarchy's new boundaries. By sunrise, the family rupture had become a national spectacle. Newspaper presses carried the same astonishing message in different words. The king had formally cut Harry away from royal privilege. Broadcasters interrupted scheduled programs. Commentators argued over duty, cruelty, discipline, and betrayal. Yet one image captured the moment more powerfully than any debate. A silent crowd gathering outside Buckingham Palace beneath a front page declaring, "The final break." Charles watched the coverage with the sound turned low. The decree had created an unprecedented boundary between royal birth and royal service, meaning that being born into the family no longer guaranteed access to the institution supporting it. Broadcasters repeated that distinction because it changed the entire argument. Harry had not been erased as a son or brother, but he could no longer expect official privilege without official responsibility. The palace released a brief statement before the morning debate became uncontrollable. It confirmed that Harry remained a loved member of the king's family, while making clear that no ceremonial access, palace support, representation rights, or institutional courtesies would continue unless directly approved. Institutional privilege meant the formal access and support provided by the royal household. The wording was restrained, but the message was absolute. Charles remained still until an old photograph appeared beside the headline. It showed him holding Harry as a child, long before duty and resentment divided them. The king looked away, then back again. Publicly, the crown had gained clarity. Privately, a father was watching the world turn his deepest family wound into a national argument. William faced a different storm. Newspapers accused him of engineering his brother's removal and preparing the monarchy for his own reign. The prince read the claims in silence, folded the paper slowly, and refused when aides asked whether he wanted a rebuttal. He knew any defense would sound like victory, and he felt none. Outside Buckingham Palace, The crowd divided into chants of support and protest. Some called the decree cruel. Others demanded clear limits around royal privilege. Then, an elderly veteran spoke during a live broadcast and cut through the noise. A prince cannot demand the crown's protection while attacking its foundations. The sentence spread across radio panels and newspaper websites within minutes. Public opinion began to shift once the exact losses were explained. Many stopped viewing the decision as exile and began seeing it as the formal end of years of uncertainty. Harry still had family ties, but no automatic royal power. Charles had drawn the boundary. William had defended it. Now each man had to decide what remained when anger could no longer carry them. The world had delivered its judgment loudly, but the final verdict belonged to the three men whose family had paid the price for restoring the crown's authority. In the end, Charles did not stop loving his son. He stopped allowing that love to govern the crown. The emergency decree became the final boundary between Harry's private place within the family and the public privileges of monarchy. It was painful, severe, and deeply personal, yet it also ended years of uncertainty, forcing every man involved to confront a truth they had resisted. Reconciliation could not exist without limits. Charles returned alone to the room where the decree had been signed. The folder still rested where the decision had become final. He opened it once more, read Harry's name, and placed a private family photograph beside the pages instead of hiding it away. The gesture revealed the painful line he had drawn. The royal bloodline meant the family connection passed through birth, and no decree could remove that bond. But birth alone could no longer guarantee automatic palace access, ceremonial authority, institutional support, or royal privilege. Harry finally accepted that no dramatic reversal was coming. He told Meghan that their future would have to be built without palace recognition, protected access, or the hope of living in a half-royal position. A half-royal position meant remaining outside official service while still expecting selected benefits from the crown. That uncertain space had now disappeared. He remained the king's son, but he no longer carried the authority of a working representative. Meghan listened as his anger settled into something quieter. She understood that the loss was not only about ceremonies or residences, it was about identity. Harry had spent years fighting the system, while still believing part of it would remain available to him. Now the monarchy had made its final position clear. Privilege must follow service, discipline, and accountability rather than birth alone. William found no reason to celebrate. In a private documented request to senior household staff, he asked that his brother's childhood belongings remain preserved, rather than removed or forgotten. The prince had defended the decree, but firmness had not erased memory. He had gained a clearer future as heir, while losing another part of the brotherhood that had once helped both men survive grief. Charles kept one clause untouched. Harry could still contact him directly during serious illness, family loss, or genuine emergency. That condition carried no ceremonial power and no institutional advantage. It simply protected the last private path between father and son. The decree saved the monarchy from endless uncertainty, but it could not save the family from sorrow. Charles chose duty. Harry accepted separation. William inherited stronger boundaries at the cost of a wounded bond. The decision did not destroy the royal family. It defined the limits required for it to survive. The decree ended Harry's royal privileges, restored the crown's boundaries, and left one final truth behind. Blood may create a prince, but only duty can preserve his place within the monarchy. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.